Peace, 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 peace. Tap in, everybody. Let's. Black God, what's good? What's good? Send a live to the peoples. Black God trying to tube in. I thought you was gonna hold it down in the chat. You trying to get in already, huh? Shout out to everybody. Peace, peace, resurrect. Uncle my eye. Power to you all. Power to the peoples. Power to the ancestors.
Resurrection, Black God.
Resurrection, Black God. Free the land. Free all our political prisoners. Welcome back. We got the altar in the background. Our spiritual, empirical, and experiential legacy and evidence that is with us, always with us. The empirical and spiritual and programmatic stuff that we stand on. And we're going to be talking about a lot of citations today. We're going into the spiritual empirical literature. So it's important that you see, you know, some of the articles, one by Eddie, you know, we got articles talking about the history of transformative justice by Anthony Nicoloy. We definitely going to be talking about the Black Native Americans. So we bringing in the wisdom from the first Americans were African. Shout out to our ancestor, Dr. David Imhotep. So we definitely bringing in our lineages of the Healing Justice lineage. So we're going to have fun. We're going to be talking about our non-traditional analysis on human justice, healing justice, transformative justice, restorative justice, and peacemaking. This is our second part to this 3-part IG Live series. Just a recap. The first one was talking about re-theorizing the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice and updating it to the non-traditional approach to human and healing justice. Shout out to Black God, shout out to Kumi, shout out to H.O.L.L.A. That's on our IG Live. You can tap in to see some of that analysis. We're going to download these videos from IG Live and put them on our YouTube. So they'll be on our YouTube channel, H.O.L.L.A TV, in the near future. Today's conversation, part 2, once again, is our non-traditional analysis on healing justice, transformative justice, restorative justice, and peacemaking. And then the third part, which is tomorrow at 4 p.m., we're going to talk about future implications and strategies of non-traditional approach. So shout out to our ancestors, Kibaka and Lukman. Shout out to Jamel, Kush, Black God, the Resurrection Study Group, Cointia, you know, the Bedford Hill Sisters, the Liberation, the Liberation Study Group. Shout out to all of our elders that imparted this information, this critical information on us, and we trying to carry that knowledge forward. And with that, I'll pass it to Kumi.
Peace. Yes, as you heard, today is part 2 of part 3 series. I'm excited to dive in what we have in it today. And leading with the African pledge, we are African people.
We are African people.
We are African people.
We remember the humanity, glory, and suffering of our ancestors.
We remember
the humanity, glory, and suffering of our ancestors.
We will honor the struggles of our elders.
We will honor
the struggles of our elders.
We will strive to bring new values and new life to our people.
We will strive
to bring new values and life to our people.
We will have peace and harmony among us.
We will have
peace and harmony among us.
Loving, sharing, and creative.
We will be loving,
sharing,
and creative.
We will work so we would teach.
We will work so we could teach.
Work so we can study.
So we may learn.
We will work, study, and listen so we may learn.
Learn so we may teach.
Learn so
we may teach.
We will cultivate self-reliance.
We will cultivate self-reliance.
We will struggle to resurrect and unify our homeland.
We will struggle to resurrect and unify our homeland.
We will have patience.
We will have patience.
Discipline, devotion, and courage.
Discipline, devotion,
and courage.
We will live as models to provide new directions for our people.
We will live as
models.
provide new directions for our people.
We will be free and self-determining.
We will be free and self-determining.
We are an African people.
We are an African people. We will win. And we have won. We will win. And we have won. We will win. And we have won. Ashe, 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 ashe. Let's pour a libation out for that and to our ancestors and to the spirit of the water that's in us, around us. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Let our ancestors be with us. Let that good energy from all directions be with us.
Literally all directions. Water from the Nile, from the happy river.
Oh, you're on fire over there. Come on, you throwing on matrix tricks over there. Stop. We're about to have a conversation about the NTA, man. Get all this AI stuff out the way, man. Yo, yo. So, I'm Corey.
I'm Kumi.
He, him, us, and we.
Yes, she, hers, us, we, please, whatever it is, whatever.
Glad God, you want to jump in and give some quick intro, who you are, what's your background? Real quick though.
Real quick? I ain't real quick with my stuff.
We got a lot of talking points. We just give a quick intro. Let people know who you're talking to.
How y'all doing? This is Black God, original member of the Resurrection Study Group, which is a historical link to H.O.L.L.A. I'm grounded in the non-traditional approach to human and social justice. I was formerly known as non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice. We here today
I was just saying that like that.
Get a little deeper into what healing is. So we're going to go through restorative justice, transformative justice, and we're going to bring it back home for y'all. And with that, I pass.
Ashe. So any audience, nobody there, let's share this live. Let's get this moving. And for folks who watching this on the playback, you can always hit us up by our website. Our organizational email is coach.holla@gmail.com. So if you're seeing this on the playback, hit us up. We wanted to start round one off talking about healing justice, peacemaking, restorative justice, and transformative justice. And the opening question for round one is, who are your elders? Where do your legacy come from? So we want to ask these traditions, where do they come from? We're going to start off by playing a video. We're going to play the videos first?
Yes.
We're going to play a video by Yazzie, Justice Yazzie. We're going to start with healing justice and then we go into the different ones? All right, we can do that.
Oh, no, you want to play the
We can do that.
Let's bring it back home with healing justice. Let's start off with restorative and transformative and then bring it back home.
So we're going to play the video. We're going to go into healing justice, and then as we finish healing justice, we're going to break down each of the different ones. So we're going to start off with some bringing in. So these videos, this audio is not videos. The audio from the video is from the conference Beyond the Bars, Seeding Justice 2023. There was a critical panel of spokespersons, experts, leaders in the field doing healing justice. Shout out to Kumi. She was repping healing justice. Peacemaking. Shout out to Justice Yazzie. Restorative justice. Shout out to Danielle. And transformative justice. Shout out to Mimi Kim. So they had a conversation about the tensions, contradictions, and the roots of these traditions. So this conversation in this particular episode in the series is building on that particular conversation and bringing in other literatures and other conversations to add to that analysis. So we're going to start off talking about peacemaking. Then we're going to listen to a video from Danielle breaking down restorative justice. And then we're going to listen to a video by Mimi Kim breaking down transformative justice. Take your notes for those, right? Because then we're going to go into healing justice a little bit. Peace, everybody. Peace, everybody. Share the live. Make sure you pass the live. Hit this on your page. We are sharing our non-traditional human and healing justice analysis, critiques, and warnings to the healing justice, transformative justice, peacemaking, and restorative justice paradigms. So we want people to critique this critique, to be in conversation with us. So share this to everybody. We are building off of the field. So we're going to bring in some experts from the field to help ground this analysis today. So Kumi, anything you want to say before we start the video?
We're checking in on our elders, right? Who are elders in the legacy? So before we check in, after check in and we, go into the work, I want to honor my big uncle, Osahani, Boche John, who recently transitioned, so to bring the energy into space also.
So everybody listening, we're not going to play the video, but we're going to play the audio. This is about 2 minutes. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear this. We starting to play now.
Story for you that addresses the origin or the emergence of peacemaking.
So it's about peacemaking,
and
origins.
I've read articles and books, and sometimes when you're trying to find the source that will answer the question, it gets to be frustrating. But one thing that's always very convenient is to have the availability of elders, and especially when they talk to you in Navajo and they say, where did they come from? How do people come back into the good way of life? And somebody said to me, from the beginning, during creation time, the universe was in a chaotic state. Everything was in disarray, and the earth and the sun were at each other in confrontation. And as a result, the world was there was a lot of imbalance everywhere. There was no water, no rain. The air was always blowing, as it does when it gets really frustrated with life here and begins to destroy. And then it was too hot. Everything went on and on and on until one day, at one point, the sun said to the earth, can we make a life? Can we establish a permanent relationship? So the earth said, that's a possibility. Only if you, treat me like the way I treat you. Talk to me like the way I talk to you. Think of me the way I think of you. She went on and on. And then, so they both agreed. And that was when peace was born.
Shout out to Justice Yazzie, breaking down indigenous ideas of peacemaking, talking about when the sky and the earth became cool with each other.
The sun
And the earth became cool with each other, and we're gonna keep that conversation in our spirit. We go to Danielle series to break down the origins now of restorative justice.
So one is that restorative justice, we talk about its roots in indigenous tradition. Indigenous tradition doesn't call it restorative justice.
Okay.
Restorative, I think I'm a restorative justice expert, which is always very weird to me. I hate the term restorative justice. So it's awkward. And it's because I'm like, common justice, we work on serious violence. And I think the idea of restoration is the idea that like before this thing happened, we were good, right? We were fine. And this bad thing happened and made us broken in some way. And if we could but repair it and look, if like the shattered window could look crystal and clear again, then we would have restored it. Like we're some old building facade being made to look like it did in the 1800s. Like restore to what? like to 1491 and a half? Like when do we go back to? And like who among us has been hurt only once, right? And like restore to when we are babies. Like we're grown, we can't restore to when we're babies. We can't just like babble and poop ourselves all day, right? Like there's not a rewind that works, right? Like there's a mending that works. There's a way of moving forward that works, right? But the notion of restorative justice, I think, very much of that when that emerges in the 70s here, it emerges with mostly white leadership. It emerges adjacent to the criminal system. Okay. It emerges mostly in white community and almost exclusively for nonviolent crime. Right? So like the first video I saw from the International Institute.
So that's Danielle Siri saying that restorative justice, indigenous people don't call it that. You know, she acts like restoring what we restoring to.
Right.
Where do we go back to? Right? And she also saying like it was started by white people in the criminal justice system, in the criminal punishment system.
I was there, right?
You was there, no question. We're going to get to some of those
points.
points.
There. No, you said how was
there.
I
was there. Talk about it. So let's go into Mimi Kim breaking down some of the history of transformative justice. There's a lot more detailed history to all of these frameworks, but these are some talking points for us to get into this conversation. So let's bring Mimi Kim in.
Bit more big scale, systematic. A lot of the work of transformative justice, y'all who are doing that, you know, it's kind of like, it's a little, what is it, DIY? It's like, it's a little, at least the way I, you know, it's kind of like, okay, we have these principles. We don't really, what's the method here? Right. And so I personally was curious to take something that had a little bit more of a trajectory, but we specifically said this is not about the cops. This is not non-law enforcement, absolutely. And if it's going to be, then, you know, cut me on, I'm not going to do it.
So that's Mimi Kim talking about transformative justice. You want to start this? You want to jump in some of that? Okay, I'm just moving. I forgot. Did you want to hit restorative justice and you want to clear some of them?
Yeah, I wanted to get the media out.
All right, then we going into that.
Yeah.
So I just want to give some summary, make sure y'all heard that.
Yeah.
So transformative justice, Mimi Kim is saying like, yo, we was doing work and we just had principles, right? And you know, and we had and we had methods. You know, we was looking for a method, right? And they seen restorative justice or transformative justice as a framework that had a little bit more trajectory, had some more methodology to what they was doing. So she's saying we was just doing work, community work, and we had a certain bunch of principles, but we didn't have a method, right? And that they needed a trajectory, and they seen transformative justice as a framework that gave them that method and that trajectory to go along with the principles, and they felt like the analysis was aligned. So with that being said, we're going to now go into breaking down some of the wisdom from healing justice and then go back to some of these points and peacemaking, restorative justice, transformative justice, healing justice. I just want to bring in our elders and comrades from, you know, Kara Page and Erica Woodland. And I want to go to page 8 from Healing Justice Lineages. And I want to read this to bring our peoples into the room, right? So, and this is early on in the book. And this top of this heading is called Assumptions and Contradictions. And they start off early in the intro of the book. We want to make a clear distinction between the healing justice framework explored in this anthology and other works by the same name rooted in restorative justice, restorative practices, reform, and healing the criminal justice system. The healing justice framework that we speak about in this book on this IG Live is abolitionist, anti-capitalist, and does not seek to reform or heal the prison industrial complex. This is important because the values, principles, and origins of these two approaches are not politically aligned. The book said, the authors of this book said, we want to make a clear distinction so that our meaning of healing justice as a political and spiritual framework is not weaponized by the state. I'll pass it to Kumi to add on to some of the points about healing justice. Where did it come from? What is his legacy? You know, where do you want to go with that?
Yeah, so just to give people a visual, thanks for that breakdown, Corey. And let's give people a visual. Like, healing justice is like the biggest, like the big umbrella of like justices. And then from that, we have peacemaking. As far as history, like the historical analysis, right? An actual theory, practice, and lifestyle culture, you have healing justice because it is an Afrocentric form of justice. Then there's peacemaking, which is centered more on like the native and Aboriginal people to this land. And then from that, referring to one of the articles, came restorative justice, because restorative justice and transformative justice were formulated within the same groups. So the Quakers, the Mennonites, the Brethren, they're educated and indoctrinated through the similar traditional systems, right? So around the same time, or in critical times, as the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice is developed, certain institutions within restorative justice and transformative justice are developing as well. And actively, you know, ancestors and others like Ellis are critiquing these institutions and their development because they were actually there while they were learning and trying to, you know, having workshops together.
We brought them in.
Together.
You're the one that brought them in.
After Attica, they were in the same prison doing the same, well, they were observing the work that our organizers were already doing. So talking about healing justice, the term itself was coined in the early 2000s because, you know, organizers, healers that were doing the work were finding that traditional means of like healing were not working for them. So they had to turn to non-traditional or just Afrocentric forms of healing, and that's where we get the lineages from, because how far back do you go?
How far back do you go to the lineages?
Right.
Talk about it.
Right, and, you know, on this live, that's our critique, not just of restorative justice and transformative justice, but healing justice too. Like, the work that our elders did in the Black Panther Party, in the Black Liberation Army, and SNCC, that is also healing justice, right? And that doesn't get that much of regard because we're not taught about the political importance or significance of these groups. But they were heavily politicized and radical, and yeah, they were doing healing justice work. They were in prison for doing healing justice work. They were framed by their country for doing healing justice work. So, however much these lineages may address that, because it doesn't include the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice, we're leaving out New York as a big key player in healing justice. But yeah, so to speak back to restorative justice and transformative justice.
But can I get some healing justice first too before you go to the so to add on to that healing justice, you know, Kumi is bringing down our legacy, man. We are saying that healing justice comes from African original instructions. Our matriarchal culture as African people, our Ma culture, our deep study of ecology and cosmology as it relates to our personal selves, and African eyes observing cosmology and ecology for our survival over multiple generations, over multiple years. And taking those lessons from earth, from air, from water, from the minerals, right? And developing processes to understand to be in balance with nature, to know how to move with the healing, to move with the Almighty. And in the African sacred mind, we call nature the Almighty. It's everywhere around us, and we see ourselves as part of nature, right? Another thing that's critical with that is that African people, all over our traditions in the continent of Africa, in the Caribbeans, in South America, in North America, right, in Indo-Kush Valley, in India and China, we took our culture all over these places, right? And then we talk really critical about the war, which is Black Europeans, white Europeans, Indo-Europeans attacking black people culture and stealing us and knocking us away from our cosmological story, right? And then that created the African Mayafa, and it's sustained by 4 layers of violence. After people are moved from our original culture and our original cosmological story, it creates a psycho-spiritual historical violence. Because we are moved from our psycho-spiritual selves, and that's a historical thing that is done generation after generation. And then that is maintained by structural or institutional or systems of oppression that inherit the war, that inherit anti-blackness, anti-Africanness, anti-indigenous, and those things are built in the fabric of the institutions that are supposed to serve the people. And after being soaked in this psycho-spiritual trauma and being moved from your culture after many generations, you internalize this in your interpersonal selves. At the community level, you start having crime-generative attitudes, anti-black attitudes, anti-African attitudes, anti-matriarchal attitudes. You don't think about Africanness as a self-determination practices, how to be good sons, be good mothers, be good fathers, be good daughters, be a people, right? Support the people that bled for you. Remember your African traditions and your ancestors and the names that you came from, right? You start to inflict violence on yourself, and you start to inflict violence on others. So it's interpersonal and internalized violence. And it's critical to note that the internalized violence and the interpersonal violence and the conceptualization of healing justice in the war, we see those things facilitated and sustained by institutional violence and psycho-spiritual historical violence. It's a causal model. Moving us from our cosmological story creates psycho-spiritual historical violence, creates institutional violence that creates the context that we are dealing with in our communities with interpersonal violence.
Mm.
Healing justice reminds us of our legacies of healing and also the legacies of pain. It tells us, don't forget any of your stories. All your stories got lessons and got teachings and got your ancestors on it. With that being said, healing justice has many traditions of black people. We can talk about the Haiti Africans, the Moors, Nelson Mandela, the queer movement in the late 80s, the black radical feminist movement, the 1970 prison rights movement, the new prison movement, the black liberation struggle, the civil rights movement, the human rights movement, free all of our political prisoners movement, right? The Ida B. Wells, stop hanging our black people movement, the Frederick Douglass, get us free from using all kinds of strategy movement, the Harriet Tubman movement, the Nat Turner movement, right? There's many lineages within our black liberation, the Kandakes. When white people and black people try to sack ancient Kemet, or what they call Egypt, right? The black women of Nubia, the Kandakes. That's part of our lineages, the Kandakes.
That's great, Corey, because I think you're going great into round 2, where we can talk about how these frameworks, exactly, but how these frameworks affect the lineages that you just named, like, and so much more. Like, how do these programs and like institutions affect or have affected Black and Indigenous historical and contemporary trauma, right? How has it met our needs or neglected our needs, and how have we really healed through these systems, right? So starting with peacemaking, you know, he referenced holy people. He referenced holy people and made a distinction between himself as a Navajo and them. So we have to ask, like, who were they?
Who were the holy people?
Who were the holy people? You know, every system has their own version of, like, you know, revised history of indigenous people's history, of African people that were here. They have their own misinterpretation of that in their foundation. So, you know, with the right study, we can like find that out. But that's the question, because he named them and they honor those people in their culture, right? Or at least they take from them If they don't honor them, they take from them, and they've adapted some of their practices. And it's also a practice in criminology, peacemaking.
Peacemaking criminology, 1970s. Just to add to that, as African people from the long lineage of healing justice, we track our African roots and culture to the Americas, to Mexico, to Guatemala, to Mississippi, to the Grand Canyon, to California. And we agree with stories about cosmology, about the sun, about water, about nature, about the holy people, about the first people. In our cosmological story in our African culture, in Americas, we got that same story too.
Can I
So that's
jump in here? Because y'all ain't let me jump up in here. I just want to add on. Y'all both kick real good stuff.
The point is that we got a lot to go in with restorative justice, transformative justice. The point with that is like, it's critical within a healing justice analysis, even talking to, and H.O.L.L.A been having healing circles with our Native American brothers and sisters from multiple identities within the Native American community. And part of the conversation is, where's the African people in the Native American community? Why do we not talk about the African identity of Native people that's been in America way before 1492, way before the AD time? So that's a question, because in our cosmological story, we are some of the first people, if not the first people, to the Americas, right? So we agree with peacemaking when they say that the holy people and that the sun and that the land had a coming together of peace. But oftentimes when those stories are told, African people are not named in those stories. And white people go get trained, and even black people go get trained by indigenous people and peacemaking people. And they're not saying that African people got this tradition in our culture. And so this is questions that we are trying to build about. And I pass to you on that. And we talk about peacemaking and healing justice, and then we're going to keep working our way down. So peacemaking and healing justice, wherever you want to.
You stole my fire with the African sacred science and the indigenous people being one of the first people to really hold on to it. So they was able to take away from the indigenous people without tracing their roots back to Africa. I'm a pass because I really want to get on restorative justice and
restorative justice over. Restorative justice down.
This is what makes healing justice so unique, is because healing justice has its African sacred science tenets. It has its cosmology from the beginning of time that gets into us and get us to heal from within, recognizing mistakes, wrongs, whatever the case might be, and healing from that. When we dealing with restorative justice and transformative justice, we dealing with the criminal punishment system. We dealing with ideology that came into effect really to make money. A philanthropy ideology to go up in the criminal justice system. And they stole from the non-traditional approach. The non-traditional approach said it's not a prison problem. Don't be coming up in here trying to address prison problems. It's not a prison problem, it's a community problem. And this is where restorative justice come in. Restorative justice talks about curing a person who's been harmed and who has harmed another. Transformative justice deals with the same type of ideology, curing a person that's been harmed and going further from that, but also looking at the systematic programs and institutions that was involved and having no contact with the state. So restorative justice dealt with alternative, you could say somewhat alternative incarceration, dealing with the individual and the person who's been harmed and trying to come to a peaceful solution. Transformative justice took it to another step and got the state uninvolved. Healing justice is where we at. And healing justice is dealing with the individual before there's a problem. Healing justice is understanding that we have problems, that we have a historical trauma coming from the North Atlantic slave trade, coming from the Hexoids, coming up into Egypt, coming from the 25th dynasty, being the last dynasty, and all of our people coming from the South to restore us. So we know we have a historical trauma within us that has transcended over here in America, and that's what Healing Justice is there to address. Healing Justice is to address the individual from an individual perspective and to ensure that he deal with his harm. I'm gonna pass it. I pass. Just make sure y'all pass that mic back. I ain't trying to take up too much.
But yeah, I just want to highlight, to your point, Black God, thank you for that introduction to restorative justice, because the trauma that we have to heal from as people is trauma that the state perpetuated, right? But restorative justice, because it doesn't include or consider that reality, we don't get that justice back in that process, right? It's not just slavery, we're talking about all forms of oppression. We have to keep in mind that any system that's meant to rehabilitate or reform or heal or whatever it says that it's doing for its people, if it doesn't, again, go back as far as healing justice does, and if it's not as vast as healing justice is, to consider why people are traumatized to the point that you're talking about, like that's real. When you are traumatized, like slavery, for example, traumatized Black people as a whole, traumatized, and our whole bodies. It changed, like trauma changed the trajectory of yourself, right? So you have to heal that split. So slavery changed the physiological base of like Black people's evolution, right? I was involved in that, like it really affected your system, but I'm talking about Black people. So in the systems that when we talk about crime-generating factors are a result of state violence. So any system that's meant to remedy that, if you don't take that into consideration.
What a crime-generating factor is, not to throw you off, because some of our audience might not know what they are.
Crime-generating factors, and I can read them beautifully from our elders interview.
Go look at video 1 too, man. We broke that down in video 1. Go look at part 1.
Yes.
Read the NTA, man.
How she tied it in, I think, was very important.
Yeah. So when you crime-generating factors, one has to be racism, which is an ideological form of oppression that dictates how you treat institution, from your home to your school, whatever, right? So if you have a high incidence of any of these things, you have a high incidence of crime or death. Dysfunctional families, inadequate education, high employment, substandard healthcare, over-reliance on public assistance, substantial underground economy, drugs, hustling, right? Driving cars, whatever. High rates of drug and alcohol abuse, self-medicating, you're dependent on certain kind of substances, whatever. So all that leads to a higher incidence of crime or death, or like death by ways in which people, you don't want to die young. You don't want to die as a suffering. You know what I mean? So we're going to go into.
Let's keep cooking. We got so everybody. If you got questions or comments, we are on round 1. This is part 2 of a 3-part IG live series. Allah's analysis of healing justice, peacemaking, transformative justice, and restorative justice analysis. We are sharing critiques, affirmation, warnings. We citing from articles, from peacemaking articles, Eddie Ellis. We got our spiritual empirical literature with us. We've been listening to videos from experts in the field. So if you got questions, if you want to affirm stuff, please share this live. We want this critique to be a critique of the critique. This round right here, we talking about the roots of healing justice, the roots of transformative justice, and the roots of peacemaking, and the roots of and restorative justice. So just to wrap some of this up with restorative justice, restorative justice was born in the prison system in the 1970s, 1980s, within peacemaking criminology, right? So shout out to the overview and history of transformative justice by Anthony Nicolai II, Peace and Conflict Review, Peace Nemo, right? They talk about restorative justice being,
Let me add on. I think that in talking about historical restorative justice from its roots, you have to talk about how it was earned. And you have to talk about he's a white European that started getting into the criminal justice system. That was his thing, criminal, and I'm saying criminal justice. And at this time, what's up, Kumi?
I just said criminal punishment system. But y'all making the same point because how were they Mennonite? He was a part of the same religious group that did the peacemaking work. So the Mennonites, the Quakers, the Brethren, all the same. They were.
Okay, all right. I agree with that.
We're making the same points. I'm about to just the articles, brother. We on the same page. So we all just know that colonized, it's stolen by white people, and we just trying to break it down. But we ain't the only one saying it. The literature is saying it.
And
Restorative justice was developed in the late 70s within peacemaking, right? It was alternative to the U.S. retributive criminal justice system by the peace churches, the Mennonites, the Quakers, and the Bedouins, right? This article is also critical because it says that transformative justice, which was also developed by peacemaking criminology, it came out a little bit later in 1990s. And it was a critique to restorative justice.
Restorative justice.
The first version, the first non-traditional approach came out in 1990, right? Then the second version, I believe, was 90. No, I know the
first version came out in 1972, 73.
Going the same way y'all going. No. We going all the way into the NTA. We just trying to jump to this crossover. Okay. But it's important before we get, so after this article was breaking down, Ruth Morris, a Quaker in Canada, challenged restorative justice in the late 1990s and started talking about transformative justice. And they bring in Donna Coker, who's one of our peoples. Donna Coker further says restorative justice processes threaten to create a deeply privatized criminal justice process. Because we understand that restorative justice is built inside of the system, is doing alternatives that are very private, that are very small, right? And then the last thing I want to highlight, and I'll pass it back to Blackguard and Kumi, within the same article, it's saying that the theories of transformative justice have their roots in transformative powers. And transformative powers was coined by AVP and was started in Green Haven in the early 70s. And once again, that's the Green Haven think tank. That's the new prison movement. That's the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice post-Attica. And that's the work that I'll pass to you all if y'all want to go into that story now.
Post-Attica?
Well, that was talking about the Green Haven.
We was talking about how, and this is how they stole when we talk about the early 70s. And Kumi, you was right with the non-traditional approach, 1989, 1993, to 1995 or 7, it was revised, but the first one came out like 72, 75, and that was called community bridging. And it developed over the years into an actual analysis of the non-traditional approach to criminal social justice. Just like we have your restorative justice, transformation justice, now healing justice is showing the real story. You know what I'm saying? And they got bits and pieces of it all. However, what's that?
I keep going. It's Eddie Ellis. I'm just going to bring Eddie in to say what happened at the 70s. He's going to break it down what happened.
I'm finished. How am I going to stop it?
Reading Eddie Ellis, who was who's part of the Red, Black, and Green, who was attacked by COINTELPRO, who was in Attica and Green Haven, and was part of helping the formation that brought the Quakers in to start AVP. He said, this is his feedback on restorative justice. Eddie said, and this is on page 100, he said, my major problem with the restorative justice model is that it assumes that there's two classes of people, one class of victims and one class of offenders, and somehow there needs to be reconciliation process between those two classes. He said, I got a serious problem with that model because they really here have not a victim and an offender, but two victims who have been brought in conflict with each other because of prime generative factors, institutional racism, because of social economic conditions. He goes on to say, my understanding of this comes because I work very closely with Quakers movement who were instrumental in developing the restorative justice ideas in the 1970s. And that was the same time we was developing the non-traditional approach to criminal and social justice. We had a lot of workshops and seminars together with the Quakers, and we tried to merge the two ideas. Ultimately, we were not able to rekindle the question of victor and offender. Eddie went on to say, in addition, I think the restorative justice model, as I understand it, is not a realistic model. He also said, if we are talking about this restorative justice as a paradigm shift, as we begin to shift away from this punitive, incarcerated model, we begin to look to a new model. This new model has to be able to explain everything the old model and add something that the old model cannot itself accommodate. Restorative justice has not yet developed its thinking to the point where it can replace the old model. It is the old model. It works within the old model. It makes the old model stronger. It sustains the state. So it's an evolving process, Eddie said. In closing, Eddie said, I think it needs to be informed. The restorative justice model needs to be informed by the non-traditional analysis, especially that part of the analysis that recognizes the direct relationship, the direct connection between communities and the state, between communities and the prison industrial complex.
Yes, yes. And I would like to jump in to say that this was in 1997, and as you guys just heard, the actual work for the non-traditional approach began in the 70s with community bridges. None of this work is credited in any of the work that we're talking about with restorative justice.
Where's our citation?
They talk about they name the era, the location, the white people that were involved. Black people's involvement is not known. So the people that are training on this and learning from this don't know. The people that are now the neo-colonialized version of these organizers don't know. And these are class people, right? The nonprofit industrial complex employs like almost 15 million people at this point. There are there's almost 2 million nonprofits in this country alone. So the complex is at work. And I wanted to just highlight that by saying, Eddie critiqued this in 97. The same video that we were playing was here, right?
2023.
And Danielle is
Common Justice.
Yes, the ED or the head of Common Justice, and she learned directly under Howard Zerr, who was the institutional head of Restorative Justice. And she said in that video that doesn't work. It's insufficient. It doesn't work. And she went deeper after that. But is she saying that with the same critique that we have as people doing healing justice? No, because she's still not accommodating for the state. What she wants to do, or what the plan is now for the complex, or what one of the plans are, is merging healing justice, restorative justice, and transformative justice. And what we need to do, and what we have been doing, is organizing against that, because as we know, when Black power movements or Black empowerment movements or Black liberation movements become co-opted and aligned with other groups,
weaponized by the state.
Exactly. They weaponize against us, and we fail to get the justice that we need and healing that we need within the system that we have to live in. So I just wanted to highlight that from what you were saying, and I'll be moving.
So we out here, man. Restorative justice is different than healing justice. H.O.L.L.A is also saying that healing justice is different than transformative justice. Yeah. We are clearly untangling these concepts. We think it's critical and hurtful to use these concepts interchangeably without understanding the political and historical roots of them. So once again, restorative justice developed in the 70s in criminal justice by white people. They also said, we also interviewed indigenous scholars and Yazzie justice on our pre-call to the conference. Said we don't know where restorative justice come from. We didn't give restorative justice, didn't come from peacemaking. Indigenous people say that Howard Zinn was looking over the Minnesota lakes to Canada and instilling their practices. So we also saying not only is it built in the state, the non-traditional approach, Eddie Ellis, the Black Liberation Army that was in prison, saying you didn't cite us, you stealing our ideas of the Quakers, our community-specific programs, our analysis of the criminal justice, and you just giving it the peacemaking criminology. That's our analysis talking about the critique of criminal justice. Indigenous people are saying all these values and stuff you pulling from in restorative justice, those are our values. The NTA would say that the 5 R's in restorative justice come from the 5 R's of reconciliation or resurrection, a non-traditional approach. So it's not only that it's a state institution, it's stealing. It's not you using our practices in a whole nother framework, and we got a framework, right? What we want to say about transformative justice as we leave that is that transformative justice
doesn't have the historical analysis.
Give them some wisdom on that real quick before we get out of that, so they can understand. Just talking about the roots of where it come from.
Because it's addressed or consider, as far back as healing justice does, it doesn't have the right historical analysis to administer the kind of justice that we need as a people, right? Restorative justice and transformative justice, they work really well on an individual level. And that's a similar critique Eddie made. Like, on an individual level, we get some understanding of the situation and can reach an agreement. But on a one-on-one, but on an individual level with self, and on a collective level with your community and your family, how does transformative justice or restorative justice administer care to you guys? And it doesn't, because it doesn't consider the state in its complicit, in its reasoning and information and how it affects through the crime generating factors. It doesn't account for the alienation that the state forces us to live in. It doesn't account for the exploitation that forces many of us to commit the crime that we're even committing to live within the state. So, yeah.
I agree with you 100%. And I think one point real quick we got to bring out is that restorative justice and transformative justice is reactionary. They are reacting to harm. They reacting to problems. They reacting to institutional failures. The non-traditional approach in healing justice is proactive. It's trying to help the harm before the harm occurs within individuals and the system, and having say-sos in these systems that represent our people. So we trying to address the harm before the harm even comes.
And let's add, we understand there's nuances in how many of us practice restorative justice, transformative justice, etc. We go into the theoretical roots of this. Transformative started in the criminal punishment. I don't know how you using it, what you doing it with it. Give me philosophical colonial state. It was started by Quakers that our elders and ancestors developed the Quakers. We developed the concept of transforming powers that later became transformative justice, right? It was stolen and put into peacemaking criminology. And like Mimi Kim and many of our Black women who came out of the snake movement, the third World Women Alliance movement, who were doing intimate healing work with ourselves, right? That intimate, deep work, right? We was pulling on our Black liberation tradition. We was pulling on our Black community-specific tradition, right? And we wasn't relying on state. So I do transformative justice is not relying on the state in many of the ways that our people use it today, but we also asking questions, do you know the historical root? And a lot of times we talk to transformative justice folks, they say that we didn't have no framework, we didn't have no method. And then we've seen this framework, this philosophy, and it aligns with our stuff, but we saying that analysis that they talk about, they're against the system, that come from our elders, that come from the Black liberation tradition. You ain't got to stop at transformative justice, come all the way home. Come all the way home. That's Assata Shakur at her trial. That's what Baba Sekou said in his trial. That's what Eddie Ellis in the non-traditional approach said in historical perspective. That's part of the Black liberation analysis of the criminal punishment system as the system was attacking us in the late 60s. I will close by saying we love that TJ is working outside of the state, unlike restorative justice. We love that it's community specific. It's relying on its, but we also saying, where is our African historical analysis, right? The framework that you're using from TJ, don't be like the white people that don't cite the black people in the Black liberation tradition. If you're gonna be TJ and use that method and that analysis, it comes from the Black liberation tradition.
Yeah, ultimately, restorative justice and transformative justice are anti-black and anti-African. They're anti-black and anti-African. Healing justice accommodates everybody that needs healing wherever it can be practiced. Doesn't matter what your roots are. The non-traditional approach directly speaks to black people and Latino people. It speaks to Africans throughout our diaspora. It speaks to us. And it speaks to non-black as to the supporting, right? Restorative justice and transformative justice doesn't hold everybody else accountable for everybody's experience. Okay.
And the real question, ancient wise, when you talk about who's the first Americans were African, the mounds, the Olmec, all of that culture, the Three Sisters. When you talk about who built America, who built the programs and the strategies from America, it was the Black liberation tradition. So part of the question is, how is all this healing going on and nobody is citing black people, and black people got to go to white people and to other formations to get healings that come from our tradition? And I close by saying, we are saying it's at H.O.L.L.A that in the healing justice tradition, saying that anything not only criminalized, not only do they get criminalized and we get locked up for doing our practices, but the system still our practices. Right? So as you locking us up for using the drum, as you lock us up for using our plants and acupuncture and free breakfast program, right? Right? You still our programs instituted with black Europeans or most in a white supremacist state structure that is not useful for the liberation of our blackness. And that somehow most of our black people forget our memory and we let the system steal our memory. And this healing justice at NTA is a call and a reminder that we staying true to our memory. And we reminded the community that we gotta bring our memory to this work. And with that being said, that leads us to the second round, which we got to move a lot faster.
Yes.
The second round is about how does these frameworks, peacemaking, healing justice, transformative justice, restorative justice, address black and indigenous people's historical and contemporary traumatic needs?
Yep.
And how are our healing legacies of being African being recognized? That's kind of what we hit on.
All right. So this is really fun to go through.
Let me just read a quote and then I'll pass it to you. Bringing in our sisters and our peoples from the healing justice lineages and our elders. The top of page 32. Uninterrupted legacies of resistance. Erica Woodland.
Mm-hmm.
Forgetting is a tool of white supremacy. Let me bring that back. Erica went straight to it. Forgetting is a tool of white supremacy. It keeps us from building upon prior strategies led by our ancestors and elders. White supremacy also teaches us that we must be first, the first to confront a particular issue or a problem. And therefore, we need to create something new instead of drawing on our rich history of revolutionary work available to us. Ashe.
Ashe. Yes. So healing justice, again, not only addresses like all the time periods, but all the institutions. And healing justice lineages, it's great to highlight how systems like restorative justice and transformative justice don't address the medical industrial complex. They don't address the prison industrial complex. They work alongside the state framework, and they don't address the non-profit industrial complex. And because they don't, the services that we're supposed to be receiving, including prison, because like we're supposed to be going there for rehabilitation or whatever, we don't our needs don't get met because these are still traditional systems, right? And that the trauma that was sustained from slavery is just continually affects us because now the stress and chronic stress kills you. Like chronic stress, it's the foundation for your addictions. It's foundation for like bad physical health. So the chronic stress and perpetual trauma, okay? Healing justice addresses that holistically. Restorative justice doesn't address that at all. And transformative justice addresses that as far back as it can remember, right? As we were talking. But yeah, that trauma is real, but that's also part of the contradiction and tension that I feel right now, because a lot of attention, like restorative justice, is the most known kind of like alternative to prison. Meanwhile, our elders, who are not that old, still alive, okay? Our elders and our many people in our communities that are not, that are their family.
Baba say cool, Baba say
cool, facts. But
Baba, you know,
for
Black
real,
Guard is almost a Baba in a minute too, man. Black Guard.
Everybody. Like, and their families who haven't been able to stay here as a result of structural violence, right? So not gentrification. And when you can't get a job where you're from, or where your family has been for X amount of generations, that you now have to move. When you can't sustain the housing that your family has had for X amount of generations, then you now have to move. Like, what does that do to your community now? But also your family, your lineage, right? So just want to add some life to the history that we were losing.
You want to add to that, Black Guard? How does these frameworks address historical trauma and the healing legacy of being Black, being African?
I don't think that I don't think that they address them at all. You know, I think these are programs. These are institution therapists. You know what I'm saying? Community therapists. And I'm putting that in a colloquial form. Like, they there to just theorize with you, but they not addressing your root cause or your historical history or what's going to make you a better person. It's not dealing with African sacred science. It's not dealing with those crime generative factors that create crime generative attitudes that makes the prison industrial complex so lucrative. You know, it's not dealing with those. I could accredit transformative justice in a little ways by saying, okay, they saying we want to keep the state process out, as restorative justice want to keep the state process in. And we know the state isn't set up to benefit us. The state isn't set up to help Black people. We live in a system that's based on white supremacy and white achievement. You know what I'm saying? So to really help us, ain't they go.
Right.
The goal is to create a program to get some money and to capitalize off the philanthropic complex. That's their interior goal. This is why you have the 99% of them white European females, to be honest. And these who don't have any cultural identity with us and our struggles.
Right.
But they could get on a whiteboard and talk about it. They could get on a blackboard and talk about it, but they can't address us from us. And out of this is why I don't feel that transformative justice or restorative justice have any identifiable link with African people and the betterment of African people.
Ashe,
man. I love that funding point, man. We're gonna play a video from the same panel, Seed and Justice Beyond the Bars, talking about the tensions and possibilities and contradictions between healing justice, peacemaking, restorative justice, and transformative justice. Shout out to Mimi Kim. That's one of our big sisters.
You can watch it on YouTube.
You can watch this on YouTube. Mimi Kim is about to break down some contradictions related to funding. I think Black Guard was hitting on some of that. And we're going to pass it to Kumi, pass it back to Black Guard to share some wisdom on how does funding in the state relate to healing justice, peacemaking, transformative justice, and restorative justice. Let's play this video by Mimi Kim. We don't see no questions. Wait a minute. Gotta leave in a minute, but looking forward to checking out the previous videos and study. No question, and Kemka, no question, and Kemka. Check that out. Any other feedback? Marlon in the building. What's good, Marlon? Mayla, what's good? What's good, family? Share the live. Share the live. Any questions? We critiquing, affirming, and sending warnings to healing justice, transformative justice, restorative justice, and peacemaking from our non-traditional approach to human and healing justice analysis. And we looking for critiques to this critique and feedback. We want this to be a dialogue, but we are separating these concepts. They don't mean the same thing from our genetic memory. Right now, we on the last round. We just first talked about what's the roots of these lineages. We talked about some of the program aspects of healing historical trauma and addressing being Black as a legacy of healing. And now we're about to talk about who fund these programs or where the funding is or how funding complicates how these things are instituted. Mimi Kim is about to break some wisdom down about funding. Peep this.
Many people that aren't making the distinction right now.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. And it's flowing, and I see it over and over again. Oh, I love this alternative. I love this. Oh, please. Oh. And then they are telling me, or they are going to apply for money that is prosecutor specific. And there's something about not just the thing, but how much space it takes up, how much money goes there. Right. That is meant to wipe us out.
Wipe us the grassroots.
Take the fact, what happened with this program, the Chat Project, was they went and testified at the local government, county government, saying, y'all, we're doing restorative justice, we're doing with domestic violence and sexual violence, which y'all said was dangerous and you shouldn't do it. Not to say there aren't safety concerns, yes, there are. But we are doing it. People applause. But they went and made a pocket of county funding that was only to train law enforcement to do restorative justice. They took that beautiful work, those beautiful words, the compelling energy to move forward, and they used it to only train, nothing else. 100%. We will give you this money if you will waste your time to turn away from your work with the community and come and train police, prosecutors to do restorative justice so that we can start getting that money and we can do it and we can learn from everything you did. And you just wasted your time. So you're not going to be, spending your energy even serving the community. Do you see what I mean? This is happening big time right now.
So Mimi Kim is breaking down some concerns and worries. Mimi Kim told a story too about writing an article in 2014, seeing restorative justice as a hurricane that was knocking down community-specific and grassroots work along the way, that people be hanging with their boats while restorative justice will be a hurricane ricocheting the people doing the work the long way while it's still the work of people because of this funding and because of the way that people are moving towards restorative justice. Kumi, you want to add any thoughts about how does funding relate to these different traditions? And what's the analysis of funding as it relates to state versus community-specific work?
Yeah, that was great insight that she gave from that panel. Because funding is very important. When you're dealing with certain conditions or working conditions, you have to ask where the taxes are going. You have to ask where the federal and state money that your governor and your mayor and your city council, city council get, what are they doing with it, right? The grants and the RFP, like what is this all funding? So if the game now is that restorative justice, because it's most popular and still backed by white people, created by white people,
by the state,
if they're the ones that can get most of this money, but most of their money is going towards militarizing or further militarizing our neighborhoods, because you're training law enforcement, you're training local police instead of actually training people in the community. We have to remember one of the biggest highlights from the NTA is that there are no prison problems, just community problems. So the more that you invest, the more energy and money you invest in the community, the less you have to utilize prisons or punishment systems in general. So if the primary focus of restorative justice is going to that instead of actual nonprofit or grassroots organizations trying to do some kind of restoration in some neighborhood communities, like that's the state right there. That's the state agenda right there. The state agenda is to be proactive when it comes to our punishment, because that's how they can ensure their profit margin. You know what I'm saying? So if it's not proactive or preventive, as like I was saying, with our shared interest, right? From our non-traditional Afrocentric point of view, yeah, we're not gonna do well in that system.
And preventative, from an African-centered point of view, might be programs for self-defense.
Ashe. So that's another part.
You know, so like, you know, a lot of healing justice in our Black liberation tradition, our Maroon practices, our Nat Turner practices, our community-specific practices, they didn't get funded by the state. You don't need an LOI or FRP to do our programs. Our programs are not initiated by the state. When we launched Attica Rebellion, we didn't need a LOI. When we took over the prison where George Jackson and Angela Davis was at, we didn't need a LOI. When we built the Resurrection Study Group, we cadred them. We gave them one LOI and we was doing a whole other process. Right? So even when we decide to work with the state, we do that from analysis of Black liberation that we cadre, right? And I hear a lot of people talk about, yo, Corey, we just say we do this to funders and we doing something else, but they don't know the non-traditional approach. They don't. So, and a lot of people think restorative justice is a dope framework, even if it comes from a non-traditional approach. So this is to my friends, the people I love. I've been telling you one-on-one, we saying this now, we disagree. It don't make sense to go into funders and tell them you doing a state institution that don't got no empirical work to resurrect us when we got empirical scholarship that does resurrect us. We actually got the empirical, spiritual, and experiential knowledge that is scholarship that you don't got to lie. It ain't
Exactly.
radical to say that we doing healing justice, you know, versus not doing restorative justice, and we got the scholarship to back it up, right? But the state is moving towards funding restorative justice and us struggling with our capitalism as colonized Black people, as formerly incarcerated people, as community leaders, as people trying to take care of our families in this white patriarchal capitalistic system. Sometimes if you don't understand the legacy and you don't have a community around you, you think that working through the nonprofit and being a businessman in a nonprofit is the only way you can take care of your family, and healing justice is critiquing that too.
That's what's key about it, because healing justice is holistic and it's dealing from an Afrocentric, Pan-Africanist perspective. And when we understand American society, and not even just American, the whole European society and white supremacist fear for Black people to control their destiny, you understand that, like Malcolm said, history is our best teacher. If we look at one of our most successful movements here on the shores of America, like the Civil Rights Movement, we see that they broke that down through philanthropy. You know, they started giving our leaders money to create programs. Jesse Jackson was one of them. They gave him money to create the Rainbow Coalition so that he don't push an Afro-Pan-Africanist perspective. You know, people like Marcus Garvey, they wouldn't give him no money. They deported him and got him off the shores of America because he was saying, "Up, you mighty race." And like Kumi said, there's over 2 million 501c. They being paid by white philanthropists to do the work that they want the white philanthropists want them to do. They not doing hollow work. They not going into the 7 neighborhoods mostly infected by the criminal justice system. They not going into those neighborhoods. They not talking to grandmas. They not teaching youth organizers how to be organizers. And this is what restorative justice and transformative justice do. They get the money from these people and they push their program. And they not pushing these Afrocentric Pan-Africanist programs on to heal from her historical trauma and heal self first. That's the agenda. And it never will be the agenda. So they're going to fund all of these programs and they're going to fund all of these 501c's that's not going to push healing justice. They're going to fund restorative justice, transformation.
And I would love to piggyback off that, like if I may. Are you clear? Okay. You brought in philanthropy. Yes. Once funding is not, once you don't control how your money is being spent or the money that you're spending, you have to like follow that kind of agenda. And like nonprofit and philanthropy was a great like force to just not practice being or to stop practicing being like self-determined and having self-defense, because who's going to fund our self-defense classes like we did, right? Who's going to train us in the practices that we were like actively getting trained in the Black Panther Party and the Republic of New Africa and Deacons of Defense and the party. So that was a big thing that got crushed too, like literally having means to defend yourself in various situations. And that's why funding compromised our systems of self-defense, because now we're dependent on people that we know kill us. We're dependent on law enforcement now to break up certain domestic violence situations or to take, to rescue people or whatever, instead of our own community people that are there. You know what I'm saying? We're dependent on traditional systems instead of our non-traditional systems that we got criminalized, murdered, like taken out, exiled. We just got completely mistreated for practicing. So how people look at like, oh, like weed, like if you're criminalized for weed, you should be like freed. Like if you have a job in nonprofit organizing and it's not for like freeing all of political prisoners or any of the issues that political prisoner work was involved in,
The state don't fund it. Restorative justice.
Organizer, shame. Like shame. That's really like a dig to the people that really did a lot of revolutionary work.
A lot of healing justice work, a lot of restorative work, a lot of where all of the wellness and community care come from our political prisoners who sacrificed their families, their lives, so that Black people and other people all around the world in the country could have justice. The Black Power movement inspired people in South Africa and Mexico, inspired the peace movement, inspired so many movements. And, to Kumi point, like, restorative justice and a lot of times transformative justice don't clearly cite that. Maybe it's an oversight or maybe people just erased in history. One point I want to do, just bring in the book again, talking about, about to wrap up with this point, but bringing in some stuff about funding. There's a chapter in this book about eugenics, and it's talking about how the roots of the medical industrial complex, and they tie the roots of the medical industrial complex as a marriage between eugenics and population control. And they start talking about how philanthropy, who is also part of attacking the Black Power movement. They attack Howard Herman Ferguson, who was part of the Republic of New Africa, one of our ancestors, one of Eddie's elders and comrades, Ford Foundation, and many of these foundations that fund social justice and prison work. They was the same people attacking our political prisoners. This is a quick description, and we out of here, by Sir Francis Gallatin, who was around in 1822 and 1911. Gallatin defines eugenics as the use of genetics to improve the human race. White supremacist lie. His priority was to stop reproduction of feeble-minded persons, deaf, dumb, blind persons. Eugenics may have been an outlying belief system. It would not have been for the large investment by major philanthropy.
One more time.
The Carnegies and Rockefellers. Both the Carnegies and Rockefeller foundations hired eugenics to gather data, to gather our stories, to gather our DNA, to gather our life from psychiatric institutions, from prisons, from orphanages, to calculate the ethnic makeup of social dependents and the cost of maintaining them in public institutions. Directly associating it was the most profitable and beneficial way to support the wealthy elite. This science was then used to prove that someone's genetic makeup was the root causes of poverty. Having a mindset of criminality, substance abuse, the tendency to be homosexual, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to understand that philanthropy, historically, since 1800s to 1900s, all the way into the 60s with Herman Bell, was working to stop the Black liberation tradition. Right? So if you know genetic memory, you see why philanthropy funds the restorative justice and funds things that work in the state and never funds healing justice or the non-traditional approach. And we also saying that restorative justice and transformative justice, they practices and ideas come from the non-traditional approach, come from healing justice lineages. So you're stealing our ideas, naming it something else, and then you're getting funded from us, from it, and it's not serving the historical needs of our liberation and the contemporary needs of our healing to get us to our historical needs of our liberation, because we got to get ancestor justice. And none of the restorative justice, transformative justice, or peacemaking answers Black people's questions. What about our ancestors' justice? Lastly, funding and white supremacist structures of nonprofits, not just restorative justice, it makes us develop traditional leaders and traditional leadership. Leadership that know how to follow the white bureaucratic model of business. Leadership that is anti-Black liberation tradition, anti-Black liberation and African sacred science spiritual traditions. It makes you take on a leadership that turns you away from your elders and ancestors and make you go to some bureaucratic white supremacist literature that is new. It tells you to forget your memory work. It's anti-healing. It doesn't have youth leadership. Many of our organizations, many of restorative justice, many of transformative justice, many of healing justice. NTA is what we stand on with healing justice, remind us that all of our traditions center our youth leadership. You only as strong as the development of your oral histories and your science being put into the leadership and the intergenerational connection of your people. So where is the experts in restorative justice and transformative justice that come from the youth, right? And that conversation that we was talking about earlier, Kumi was on a panel with experts who've been in restorative justice, transformative justice, peacemaking, and Kumi said, I only been in this game for 2 years. She's a young person, because our legacy of non-traditional approach and community specific is that the young people, the community people, they are the experts, right? But it's the processes and the rituals to heal those young people so that they can actualize being the experts in their life.
Talk about it, brother.
Right, so this funding within these frameworks is not, we are being colonized by this funding. It is not helping us develop the kind of programs, the kind of community-specific programs that address our lineages of healing and development. And I pass it to Kumi and Black God. That's it right there. That was our final round. But any closing words on funding and these frameworks before we sum up the closing words for this whole conversation?
I just wanted to add one more thing, because I think we should have closed it on what you just said. When we talk about not only funding these organizations, they also look to control and infiltrate these organizations. And that's because a lot of times Black organizations, these so-called for the people organizations, and they got white leadership in the hierarchy. Like the Urban League, all of these organizations that were supposed to, help uplift Black people, they did a little bit, but their organizational structure clearly shows that they're not going to do all they could do for us. I pass.
Shay. It's on you, Kumi. You got any close words to that? You good? You forgot your point? You
No, I agree.
See like you want to jump in before.
I just wanted to say, like, this is actively happening. Like, funding or increased funding for restorative practices is actively happening. You know, this concept was from earlier this year. So, yeah, if you're an organizer, you want to get into organizing, like, healing justice should be the framework that you want to support, learn more about, because doesn't matter where you're from, every place has their own revolutionary grassroots history. And healing justice, it stems from that. So whatever work that those freedom fighters were doing, we have to keep doing. Like that energy, like we have to keep the energy alive. That's the legacy. Yeah. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in and listening. When is the third part?
The third part is tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We'll be back.
Part is tomorrow.
The last part, re-theorizing the NTA, re-theorizing the non-traditional approach, future implications. Thank everybody for tuning in. Today we did a lot of work, man. Look at this video. Go back to the beginning. We covered the roots of healing justice, transformative justice, restorative justice, peacemaking, and non-traditional approach. We talked about their programs and how do they programs address historical trauma and our legacy of being African. Thirdly, we talked about funding and the complications of funding, right? And who gets funded and who don't get funded. Just to be clear, H.O.L.L.A is down to build with people. H.O.L.L.A is a nonprofit, but 75% of our work is not funded by. Right? So don't get fooled. I don't know what you see, and we cadre. We are clearly working in a nonprofit, but we got larger goals outside of the nonprofit. And we need to talk about those things outside of this. But we are not, all of our programs and most of our programs don't get funding. All of our healing justice programs, we don't need LOIs to make them. The resources of the people, the spirit of the people. We were just on an elders call today, supporting our elders, and the people is telling us, and we telling the people, we want to do this because we people, right? So, Bill, we got a lot of programs. Healing justice is not funded by the state, and it's a struggle. How do you build your team? How do you build your leadership? How do you build your personal family? Because you're not getting you ain't getting guap like that from a nonprofit. But you get the spiritual resources from your family, from your community, the love from the legacy, the transformation of your own self, right? The honoring of your ancestors and your elders. That's a beautiful resource.
I got one more thing to say. Because, you're saying a lot. And yeah, like, the money that's being spent is not serving us. And we're not being developed to really learn how to service ourselves. So we are still dependent on the state, but in less and less way, because our social services are being defunded actively too, and have been, from like public housing to public education to food to public health, everything. So how are we left to survive in the system now? A lot of our people, and it will soon be in many places, it's already a common practice, it's $1 billion industry. Blood donations, quote unquote blood donations. People basically giving away their blood, or plasma to nonprofit organizations. Red Cross is a nonprofit organization, right? The medical industrial complex. There's overlap and intersections within these things. So you're giving away your blood that you need at a frequency that no living being should, so it's dangerous to you, but you're doing it because it's now a source of income, right? How you've been treated or by the counter factors and attitudes has left you where giving away your blood is now a form of income, a stream of income.
Strategy,
right?
Survival.
But you're not getting adequate income from this very diet that you're being exploited for, because the traditions that are supplying this service are traditional. I mean, the systems that are doing these services are traditional, and they're European, and they're white supremacist, and they're oppressive and exploitative. So you're giving away blood twice a week for $20, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business. And the medications that they're producing, you don't even have access to. But with money, have access to them, or there's people in the different socioeconomic class than you, a higher socioeconomic class than you, have access to these pills. So yes, our people are suffering, as we know, but we need to struggle together, because it's all a matter of education and spirit.
We're going to close out on that note with the Sada Shakur Black Liberation Chant. Thank you all for tuning in. Share this video. This is part 2 of a 3-part series. The final part is tomorrow, 4 p.m. We're going to try to be on time. Once again, close out with us with spirit. We're going to do this 3 times. The first one low for our own self and spirit. The second one a little bit medium for our community that we are right with. And the third one loud for our ancestors and our future. It's our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It's our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We love and support each other.
We must love and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing
To lose but our change.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and support each other.
We must love and support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our change.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We must love and support one another.
We
We
must
must love and support one another.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
we have nothing to lose.
but our chains.
Ashe, ashe.
Ashe.
Free the land, free all of our political prisoners. Shout out to all of our mothers, aunties, uncles, grandmas, and elders. We send our love and our ashe to you. Peace and resurrect.
Peace, resurrect.